There's an industry term that I love, and it's inside baseball. For those unfamiliar, it means talking about a topic or a thing that is well outside the scope of what the public looks at in a competition. What kind of tournament formats to use in competitions, the pros and cons of each, and how these formats can play off each other in various stages of an event can all be described as peak inside baseball content. And if you've ever watched a fighting game tournament, you will inevitably come across a number of terms you may or may not be familiar with already. Pools, double elimination, double jeopardy, and so on. But there is one term that is considerably rarer in the FGC than in any other competitive gaming communities, and that is the dreaded Swiss system. No, it's not another name for neutral or an old-fashioned way to say a move has plus frames on block. It's a different tournament format that has existed for a long time and appears across many different sports, esports, and just competition in general. Even if we don't convert you into a complete Swiss believer after this video, at least you will have a slightly better understanding of not just how it works, but how existing systems differ from one another. If some of you enjoy the crazy ramblings of our very own tournament organizer and writer, Sebastian, and would like to see more of this type of content in the future, do let us know by subscribing, liking, and leaving a comment on the video. Swiss is a style of competition in which you take a group of players, or in some cases teams, and have them play a set number of rounds against each other. Each round, they play a closer competitive opponent, resulting in a final standing table that lives somewhere in between a double elimination bracket and a round-robin group. Depending on the number of players, number of rounds, and the format of each of those rounds, you might have a low-resolution standings table, meaning that there are a lot of players who mathematically share the same position. Reference it back to how two people can share a 6th place spot in a double elimination bracket, but expand it to multiple positions up and down the standings. On the other side of the spectrum, you can have a high-resolution standings table, giving you a clear idea of where each player is after all the rounds have been played. In fact, the most detailed standings you can get is from round robin, where all participants play each other once. So in a group of 8, there would be 7 rounds, each with a different opponent. Of course, you can even push that further into double round robin and beyond, but we will leave that for later. In each round, players are matched versus each other based on their standing and their score. For instance, in round 2, players who have won their first round match will only face those who also won their first match. In round 3, you will have 2-0 players facing each other, then 1-1 players facing each other, and 0-2 players facing each other. You can imagine how the next few rounds go. If you've ever played a local chess tournament, you will likely be familiar with their Swiss setup, which often runs 5 to 9 rounds depending on the size. Another place Swiss unexpectedly shows up is football, or soccer for our American audience, in the European Continental Club competitions. These are organized by the region's governing body, UEFA, from 2024 onwards. It will feature a Swiss group stage made up of 36 teams for the Champions, Europa, and Europa Conference leagues. And it's not just traditional sports either. The Swiss format appears in Rocket League, Counter-Strike, Dota, Valorant, and dozens of other titles with competitive scenes, usually as part of qualifier-level events where there is a need to distinguish the best 4, 8, 12, or more participants from a much larger pool. Closer to home, Mr. Aquaman's Coliseum, a well-known Mortal Kombat tournament, uses a variation of the system based on matchmaking, one that was inspired by one of Joshua Gray's Xbox tournaments. So what makes this format so popular? Well, it all comes down to 2 key categories that make it desirable for both the players and the tournament organizers. The first is that going under a Swiss system means there are no going 0-2 at pools. Players can, and in fact should, compete all the way through the Swiss group, which could be 5 to 7 rounds long. Does that mean some players might go as far as 0-7? Yes, that can happen. And sure, it might feel bad going down that badly. Still, the granularity it adds, the possibility of leaving a pool after a few hours with the vast majority of players earning at least 1 win, as opposed to half the participants walking away winless, feels a bit better. Another point to bring up is that of seeding. The advantages and disadvantages it produces are lessened in a Swiss system compared to a traditional double elimination pool. The first round is still impacted by seeding, but as rounds go on and the results affect the standings, the chance for a player that was seeded lower than their actual skill to go out because of a poor matchup greatly diminishes. We've all heard or seen of players that were in an amazing lower bracket run, but due to seeding, they faced an opponent that was simply too good or that got knocked out from the upper bracket and thus became a killer in the lower one. With a Swiss system, this can still happen, but it's much rarer. Depending on the setup, Swiss can also be a great way to keep players engaged with the competition. Each round can have a set time, for instance, 30 minutes, which means a player can finish their match in, say, 20 minutes. They know they have around 10 minutes of downtime before the next round starts. In bracket systems, this wait time can be much longer as the prior round might still need to be played. But now we are starting to touch on the second component, how Swiss formats enhance the experience for organizers as well. So let's get into that. Something we left out during all those examples of Swiss in the real world is that, well, they're all variations of Swiss. For that reason, Swiss formats are like zoners. They are not all the same, but we know them when we see them. Take for instance chess. Some of the most prestigious tournaments in the world use Swiss, and they go beyond the mathematically optimal number of rounds, extending to 12 or even 14 rounds to be players, all to get as accurate an assessment of skill as possible. Going so many rounds in the FGC is not really needed, as we can just increase the number of games in each set, from say a best of 3 to a best of 5, if we want more detail in each matchup. Another is UEFA's rules, which vary in that the 36-team groups and their matchups are predetermined, meaning that the opponents in each round are drawn at random from various pots before the start of the competition, which means adding seeding back into the picture. In the end, the best 8 teams advance to the round of 16, with the next 16 teams in the table playing a knockout playoff. In esports, the variations get even more numerous. In CS and Rocket League, the common way to do it is a first 3 wins qualify, meaning that a team needs 3 wins to qualify for the next tournament phase. This results in teams going 3-0, 3-1, and 3-2. You could consider this triple elimination, but it's a bit more complicated than that. There is also Mr. Aquaman's Coliseum, which features a matchmaking phase of 2.5 hours. During this time, players queue as part of a single pool of participants. As the matches start to come in, a standing table populates, with the system, in this case StarGG's, trying to match up players based on their skill. The final top 8 advance to a double elimination final. In this area in particular, we spoke with Mr. Aquaman about running his event with this matchmaking format. The format doesn't worry about DQs, no-shows, late signups, one-off bad connections, etc. None of that really matters with the format. This allows for less administration holdups, it allows for no downtime for players, and it allows for everyone to get a ton of experience. These are just a few of the formats used that could be conceived based on Swiss. There are dozens more, and that is to say something of more uniquely suited rule sets that sometimes take into account things like goal differential in football, wins and losses within the same set, or some other metric within some games. Beyond their unique twist on the core idea, there is something that almost all Swiss systems universally agree on. The format is best used as a qualifier to what would be called the main event. We think the format can fill that role perfectly in the FGC. Instead of double elimination pools, imagine pools of Swiss brackets that then feed a top 32 or top 64 double elimination bracket to finish the rest of the competition. And it's not like those double elimination brackets must start with all their participants in the upper bracket, as you can determine a certain number will start already in the lower bracket based on the final Swiss standing. So yes, it may sound complicated, and maybe the few times you saw the format, be it as a player or organizer, scratched your head and were left thinking, what was the TO cooking with this one? But there is a lot of value to be extracted from this competition style. Of course, there are other things in the way that might stop this from wider adaptation. The most important one is compatibility with offline competition. Swiss means players will be sat at setups for longer, all players, which can result in an increased need for more consoles or PCs at the venue. Depending on planning, it may also result in pools lasting longer. The larger the Swiss groups, the better in terms of competition, but the higher the chance someone will run into an issue that delays the end of a particular round, thus pushing all subsequent rounds to later. For this reason, we can only recommend it for smaller local events, think less than 24 players, or online events where procuring setups and subdividing groups is almost not a problem at all. In fact, this is something that has been identified in the past as a major issue with these style of tournaments. Once again, our friend Mr. Aquaman chipped in with his experience. Offline, there isn't much room for implementation of this format. However, many entrants in offline would need half of that in setups. If 300 signed up for Combo Breaker, they would need a max of 150 setups to pull off that kind of format, since everyone would need to be playing the whole time. That is just one of the logistical nightmares that would occur. It is also undeniable that double elimination is a tradition in the FGC. It's the format of choice for everyone for the past 2 decades, and thus, it's hard to argue that something else, something that can be more complex, is worth replacing. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you're still watching, then maybe we've convinced you that this Swiss format might be worth trying. So how do you do it? Well, if you're a player competing at a local, ask your TO if they would be up for running a Swiss bracket at some point. If they look puzzled, send them this video. If they look distraught, they already know the struggles. If you want to plan one out yourself, we have to give a shout out to Start.gg, which should already be familiar to all FGC folks as the platform of choice for many fighting games. Their Swiss system is excellent and incredibly flexible. From all we talked about in this video, it should be evident that there is no one-size-fits-all for Swiss. But if we can suggest a format, it would be 5 rounds of first to 2 or 3 matches. If we envision a 32-person online event as the target, you can go with 2 groups of 16 players each, and the top 4 advance to a final top 8 double elimination bracket. This results in an initial round of the top 8 made up of players that did not face each other during Swiss, and the first place finisher in each group taking seeds 1 and 2 respectively. Ultimately, Swiss formats are another tool on the vast array of formats tournament organizers can pick, and although we are vouching pretty hard for it here, it has a number of challenges that can keep it from becoming as popular as existing double elimination pool formats. With all of that said, we hope to see more Swiss tournaments, or at least more Swiss-inspired formats in the fighting game community. It has a lot to offer players, and in an online setting, it can be a blast to play through for a new and veteran player alike. Let us know in the comments if you like Swiss, or if you don't like Swiss and why. And thank you again for watching all the way to the end. And be sure to check out DashFight.com for news, guides, and so much more. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.